All right, so welcome to another episode of It Had to Be Me. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, It Had to Be Me illuminates pivotal moments in people's lives that have altered the course of their human experience forever. And my goal is to really highlight these human beings who have transformed pain into purpose and are serving at the highest level. So today's next guest is a perfect example of that. He has dedicated his life to protecting and preserving the innocence of children. He's played an integral role in both domestic and international movements to fight human trafficking, sexual assault, and sacrificial practices, all of which have fueled his determination to annihilate sexual predators of all kinds, but particularly those targeting children, starting in our own backyard. So I met Nate not too long ago through another friend who was putting on an event to support organizations like his. And in the short time that I've known you, Nate, all I have to say are amazing things. So without further ado, we have Nate Lewis on the podcast today of The Innocent. And I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your background and what you're doing today, specifically with The Innocent.
Well, thank you for having me on this podcast.
Yep.
I look forward to this. I'm excited. We were just briefly talking, and it's like, wow, you're such a pro. And so I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome.
My background, which we'll probably get into a little bit about that on this whole episode here. I grew up in a small town in Washington, and my life took me all over the world. Been to about 50 countries. And had some life-changing moments for sure, many of them. And through a journey, I ended up finding myself fighting child sex crimes and focused internationally for several years. I've seen a wide range of how it happens, the abuse of children, trafficking in different regions of the world. And then I heard the people of the United States demanding change and something to happen right here at home. There wasn't a ton of things that were happening. And then I listened to the police and where their gaps were in the holes. And I was like, well, why don't we just become the bridge between the people and the police? And let's go out there and let's let the communities fund their local police to keep their communities safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I said, all right, let's go. Let's do this. And it's been an interesting journey, but it's been amazing already in somewhat of a short time of my own organization. Obviously, I've been doing this outside of my own organization for a while, but this has been moving quickly.
Yes.
There's people who are like, wow, how can I help? Let's go.
Yeah. So formally, your organization was known as the Innocence Rescue Mission, correct?
Yeah, Innocence Rescue Mission. Yeah.
And you recently rebranded to The Innocent.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
TheInnocent.org.
TheInnocent.org. Okay. And what is your mission with The Innocent? Tell us about it.
It's pretty simple. It's to protect and preserve the innocence of children.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, the innocence of a child, that wonder and just the innocence, right now, today's day and age, especially, it can just be taken from a child. And it's one of the most precious commodities in life. And at some point, we all kind of lose our innocence. And sometimes it's like an onion. There's just a layer and layer and layer. But once you lose it, sometimes it's within a matter of an hour, or a night.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose it, it's not possible, but it's extremely difficult to really get some of your innocence back. Not ever to the point of like a 5-year-old child has that innocence, And so it's just being such a precious thing. I just feel strongly to how can I protect that, preserve it for as long as possible.
Yep.
For children, because it's such a valuable thing,
Yeah. It's those formidable years that really shape who we are in our adult life and the impact that we make, right? And I actually wanted to spend a little bit more time on, this topic and asking you some more questions before we get into your story, because I've got a lot of questions around sexual predators and the internet and just the evolvement of these things. And I know for me, when I think of a sexual predator, I don't know why, but I think of the creepy guy driving the ice cream truck. Like I can still hear the music in my head, right? But I'm curious to know from you, like, what do these people look like? Is there a profile they fit? Describe to me what you see when you sort of sting these guys.
Yeah, they're human beings, number one. It's not really a profile. Unfortunately, it's so prevalent. It's doctors, teachers. there's really no profession, no background. I think that here's an interesting thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at somebody who's addicted to drugs, whether it be heroin, cocaine, meth, whatever it may be, there's a lot of very, very successful people, men and women, who wouldn't probably go down the route of meth or heroin or something like that because it's just not something. But all, for the most part, men and women, sex is part of their life and their lifestyle. So people of influence, people who are very successful, and people who aren't, just the average human, we were made to engage in sexual relations with other humans. So it's just normal and comfortable for us, to be aware of it and practice it.
Yep.
It's not like I have to be addicted to drugs or that's my lifestyle. Our lifestyles are somewhat involved with sex.
Yep.
At a point. So that's what makes it difficult, is because there isn't really a profile, because it's part of our nature. We were designed, to reproduce in that way.
Yep.
And so it's hard to profile people. It's what happens in the relationship that the individual has with sex. It's really critical, and what forms that relationship in their life.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good segue into kind of the next question I have. The internet has obviously opened more doors for these people to prey on the innocent, and I've heard you discuss the difference between the dark web and, as you've coined it, the light web in another podcast. The dark web being, those platforms that fly more under the radar, and the light web being the mainstream social media platforms that are just out there for all of us to access, right? Is there any delineation between a predator on the light web versus the dark web in terms of their presence or their target demographic?
There's several things on this topic, and I think I always relate it to drugs, because people know, like, oh, the war on drugs, or they have some sort of relationship already. They may not know about child sex crimes and trafficking and all that stuff, but they know about drug trafficking or drug crimes. And so I think that it's if you were going to go on a vacation somewhere and you're addicted to a drug, you're probably going to know where to find it when you're on vacation in this town or wherever you're going, right? There's just networks, there's places, how to find it. But like, let's just take my mom, for example. She would have no idea where to find that, right? It's not because she's never looking for it. So it's kind of similar in this world. Like, if you're in this world, there's places that exist for this anywhere you go, in any town, in any place. That's the dark web, right? Where it's hard to find it. And then the light web is just what my mom is on, social media, right? And that is just what we feel safe on. We're just kind of innocently post pictures of our children on, and predators can steal those pictures off of it, and it's out there in the light for everybody to see, right? Yeah. And the difference between them is that in the dark web, they kind of think that they're safe, that they hide. They don't need to hide in the dark so much, so to speak. It's like, it's just known that this is where we pay for sex and this is where we hook up and blah, blah, blah. With the light web, they kind of have to hide. They make fake accounts, or they have different things related and try to hide their place. They're not going to just show up and be like, oh, it's me, and here's all my friends. And so it's different. Now, I would say that the thing that's sad is that the dark web exists for the dark web, and people that are there, half the people that are there for that reason, right? And then there are people who are forced to be in that. But the people that are on the light web, they're just living their everyday life. Yep. They're being innocently going out and doing about these things. And the sad part is that not only is there a platform where predators can now contact children, they're actually enabling it and promoting it. And I'll give you a specific example. In real life, I would never be like, hey, I got a 50-year-old man. I think he should be talking to this 11-year-old, right? Like, I'm going to introduce you guys. And when you guys start communicating, I'm going to actually introduce you to another 150-year-old men, with some weird, creepy name that they have. It's not even like, hi, I'm Michael. Hi, I'm Dr. 69, right? Like, I use that one often, but there's like teen model. There's all these names that they can have. And now the algorithms are going to start just sending you 450 within 5 days of these men, as you start accepting and then within seconds they go, boom, we have this recorded. We'll be putting out videos of some of this stuff. But
Yeah.
here's the sad thing is if the girl, let's say who's 14, let's just say in this scenario, is just be an innocent girl, not knowing, and gets a friend request from someone and accepts it, and the first message that comes through is a picture of his private parts, a layer of that innocence, regardless what you think, has been peeled away.
Yep.
Right, without her choice. She may not even have thought about even getting into that conversation, but it's now just she has no choice. It's just been dropped into her lap, right?
Yep.
And so that's tiny scratching the surface of the light and dark web, and there's people that are on both.
Wow.
You know? But for the most part, your child probably not on both, but the predators are on both.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm curious to know how this starts. Like, I'm always thinking about nature versus nurture. Is this a sort of a switch that gets flipped on and it's already in your genetic code, or is it a progression? Like, why would someone have a perversion towards a child versus just, seeking out adult pornography, for example?
Well, there's not one answer. There's several. There's lots of reasons why. I mean, I could share a few. I would say that some of these children, or some of these predators, were abused as a child, and so they're now. Oh man, I could go totally in on this one. I'll give you a small story that we'll come back to later, but think of it as light and dark, right? As a child, that innocence is just this light, this beaming light that just goes around innocently through the day, and then some dark thing comes in and now infects that light with darkness. It's like a disease. Now that light is gone, and now that child holds darkness. Now whether they believe that sexual abuse is normal, so now they start participating in that with their friends innocently, like, oh, well, this is just normal because it happens to me, and oh, did you know this feels good, and so then they start spreading that darkness to other friends, children, siblings, whatever. And so it's like this dark that continues to grow, and the disease just keeps growing, right? And so is it likely that as that child who's been abused and abuses others and gets older, comes back and abuses others? Yes, there's so many scenarios of that, which is why it's important for us to prevent it from happening, right? Like preserve that innocence. But there's so many different reasons. And I would say that here's another one. I know so many stories like this. Like, oh, my dad had a Playboy around, or hey, there was a Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, and I'm going to go back in time a little bit. It's way different now, and I can talk about now too. But it progresses from that to, maybe before we get into the digital world, which is insane. Back in the day, it would be like, okay, well, now what is there? Oh, there's VHS tapes, or there's like, oh, these girls going wild and all that. And like, it's almost like going back to the drug thing. I didn't start with heroin. Right, I started smoking Marlboros, like cigarettes, and then it became pot, and then it became like, hey, try out this like mushrooms, and then it became like LSD or whatever it was, and then to the point to where now like you're doing heroin, like just naturally progressed. Not often, I believe. I'm not a drug expert, but I don't think people just experiment with the heroin for the first time, like when they're 13 years old, like, hey, I'm going to just see what drugs are like. Let's go straight to heroin.
Yep.
And so there's this progression, but it's also becomes back to the dopamines, and you look at the science of the brain, and if you analyze addiction and stuff like that, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex addictions, there is an actual biological chemical thing that's taking place, which is what people get addicted to pornography with, because they're addicted to the release and the endorphins and all that, and probably to cover up whatever they're dealing with, and the trauma that they have going on or have had in their life. So instead of some people resorting to drugs, they resort to sex, right? And when they're going through hard times, it's like, I just need to have sex.
Yeah.
They don't drink. Maybe they do drink too, but there's so there's that element of it. And I know I'm probably getting away from the question
keep going.
here.
This is perfect.
But it's now the boy who was like, whoa, what's that feeling from seeing the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue? Now that's not really so much giving him that feeling anymore. So where do I graduate to? Well, it's the same thing. Even some of these sites, and whether it's social media or dark web, they might be going intentionally to look at like a 24-year-old, but then the next thing that they're showing is a 22-year-old, and then the next thing they're showing is a 19-year-old, right? And then, quote unquote, a 19-year-old that happens to look like 16, right? And then, an 18-year-old who looks 15. And so now the 24-year-old isn't even really doing it.
It's obsolete, yeah.
Yeah, right? But what's critical, this is the most important part of all of this, and this is why we exist. How do we get to the predator before they go from digital to physical? That is what we have to do.
Because that's, so if I'm understanding correctly, it's like a gateway drug. So, if you try weed, then that leads to something else, right? If we were applying this to drugs, right?
Yeah.
And eventually seeing it online in 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions or whatever, it's not enough.
No.
So then that's where the tragedy really happens, because now they're actually physically expressing that need, and that's a whole nother dopamine fix. I mean, there's so much risk and thrill, I'm sure, that makes that super hard to return from.
To another level.
Yep.
Imagine telling somebody that you love them through a text or even on a phone call and actually making love to somebody. It's completely different, right? And so there's that touch, there's the other senses that are going on, as far as there's lots of science. We don't need to go down that road,
right.
but there's a lot more that goes on. So here's the thing. So where do they graduate to? Sometimes they end up going to pay for it, right? But also they end up not paying for it. They graduate to like, well, why am I paying for this? Somebody was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I'm going to act on that because I haven't fed my addiction in like 2 days. There's so much science to this.
Wow.
And I'm going to give you a real story that happened locally with one of my team members. So my team members are active duty law enforcement.
Yeah.
And this is really, truly one of the reasons why. I love this story because when him and I first met, we were talking about how do we do this work, and not having all the answers. But he shared this story with me. He's one of my close friends now. We just hung out and went camping this last weekend. Love this guy like a brother. And I always am interested in people's why. And so I was like, you got a full-time job, bro. Like, why? Or is this passionate? Why do you want to like volunteer your time on your off time to go do this? And when you hear these stories, and I ask all my team members this, and you're going to get to see some videos of their personal stories, but when you see fraud, or when you see like embezzling cases or whatever it is, and they're reacting to all these cases, it's so hard, even drug cases, because people are choosing that. When you see children who did choose this life be abused and have their life change happen, there's just like this draw that like you can make real impact and real change. So he's telling me this story, and I can't give too many details, but it'll give you the idea.
Yeah.
So there's guys who just download this child porn, right? We call it child sexual abuse material. That's really what it is. I call it child sexual assault material because they're assaulting children. They're videoing it and then they're putting it out there. And there's guys out there that are just downloading it, watching it, viewing it, saving it in their files, all this stuff. It's weird. And some people are trading it like commodities, on these dark webs. And there was a guy who they had very clearly identified. This guy is downloading a lot of child rape videos, basically, and photography. And so they got everything they needed, and the arrest warrants, search warrants, all the stuff. And he was on the team, and they went and arrested this guy. And so what happens for some, this is just one case, but it's pretty common, is they have an addiction, right? But for an alcoholic, it's not taboo for me to be at a bar and be way over drunk. People like, dude, that dude's wasted, and he's in here every night wasted.
Yep.
So he has an addiction, and it's very public. It's out in the open, and there's very public places you can go and support your addiction.
Yep.
Right? This is a hidden addiction because it's not really something that's easy to talk about. People don't talk about, and there's that. We have a long way to go to provide resources for people with some sort of sex addictions. There is lots out there, but especially when it comes to children, an addiction to children, when you have children of your own, right? It's so you hide it from your wife and your kids and your coworkers, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
So many times, how many times have you probably personally that's listening said, I never would have thought it would have been that guy, right?
Yep.
Because they hide it, right?
Yep.
So they hide it. They try to cold turkey it. They fight it. They don't want to do this. They're probably dealing with guilt and all this stuff. They know it's wrong, but they can't help it. They can't help it. And so this guy gets arrested, and in that first little window, he's like, wow, it's over. Before he realizes what's the consequences. He's like, finally, I'm going to beat this. My wife's obviously going to know. My kids are going to know. My coworkers are going to know. It's probably going to be in the newspaper. Like, I'm going to be a registered sex offender, probably, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, finally, there's hope, and I'm going to change my life direction. Well, definitely it's going to change your life direction. So these guys that were interviewing him asked him, like, hey, we know you have the digital world's like prevalent in your life, but have you ever physically abused a child? And he was like, well, there's this one time. And my buddy asked me, hey, can you want to come help me? I'm helping a friend build a deck. And he'll pay you, like just on the weekend, let's go over there and we'll help him build this. We'll just bust it out real quick. And so the owner said, hey, it's dirty and muddy. Don't use the bathroom inside. If you use the bathroom, use the RV. And so, like, okay, cool. Well, this guy, who's probably got a couple of days without his addiction, and it's not a physical addiction yet, which is like the ultimate is a physical, act. He goes into the RV. Well, that guy, the owner's daughter's friend, happened to be in the RV. What does he do when he's using the bathroom? He touches his private parts. And now he comes out and she's still there, and she looks better than the images, or looks like the images. And so she happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he robs her of her innocence in the RV trailer.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a true story.
So this is a guest at a home helping
build a deck,
goes to the RV. Oh my gosh. It's like it's on there on a platter for him or something.
And he can't control his addiction. And he goes from digital to physical and takes that girl's innocence.
Wow.
Which is so unfair.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I do what I do, because the unfairness of that child who does not deserve, did nothing wrong.
She was just wrong place, wrong time.
And she's going to now potentially, have to work through her relationship with sex for however long that takes.
Wow.
And that's one minor story that happens all the time. You asked the question of, well, how did they get to children? I don't know. I often wonder what people's childhood upbringing was in their relationships with other humans or with their parents, or lack of a relationship that causes them to revert back to a time where they didn't have a relationship, right? They didn't have a intimate relationship, sexual relationship. Maybe they didn't have any relationship. Maybe wherever they were bullied in school. They weren't popular. They weren't accepted into crowds. They didn't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And I don't know. I don't think there's a solid answer. That's what I go back to. Is there's so many. I've seen so many things that there's not one blanket answer of why. I can tell you why it's so easy, why it's happening so often, because it's so available and accessible.
Yeah.
If you go back in time, for me, I go back to like the Blockbuster Video or whatever, like section that was a door back there that you couldn't get back in, and like, I didn't even know what was back there. I had no idea what was back there. And my dad's not going to tell me like, oh, it's a bunch of videos about. No, there's going to be like, oh, you just have to be 21 to go back there. It's for adults only. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, right? And then we move past that, and you go to a 7-Eleven, let's just say, and there's the magazines that are covered, completely covered. The magazine's covered, but it just says Playboy at the top, right? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Playboy, at the time, I don't know what that means, but it's covered up. I wonder, why is that covered up? Oh, because only certain people can look at it. Okay, whatever. Just give me any excuse. I'm going to follow it. Right now, my 5-year-old son he doesn't get a phone. He doesn't have electronics. But if he were, he could type the wrong thing in and find things that are going to instantly take away. His curiosity is going to overload him to, what was that? What is that? I mean, there's no restrictions. And I'm not going to get into the porn industry. That's not what we focus on. There's amazing organizations out there that are fighting it, and the accessibility and what is being held on there, and the girls that are underage that are on these platforms. Like, that's a whole nother thing. But the access on social media, the things that we're seeing everywhere is desensitizing our children.
Yep. And I think that's what makes your work so necessary, is that there's no blanket answer. You know what I mean? If there was, then this wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Like if we could figure out like the type of child that would be, that would fall victim to these things, or the type of, predator that is more prone to these behaviors and tendencies, then we could solve the problem. You know what I mean? We could segment these people, get them the help they needed, and this wouldn't be an issue. But it's, it's much bigger than that. There's so many variables, and it's impossible to control all of them, right?
Yeah.
Because like you said, it could just be a matter of a kid being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like I always think about the Butterfly Effect, that movie. One split second decision, or just being in one, standing in 5 feet to the left, right? And that could have been the difference in life and death, right? So
I want to go right off of that. I think this
Yeah.
is really important. Going
Yeah.
back to the same RV story, things can be done, because what's happening right now, and the reason why we exist
Yeah.
is because we have to take a proactive approach.
mhm.
We can't react to the 911 call anymore.
Yeah.
We have to. And we have to be proactive, because if we would have got to that guy 2 years earlier,
You wouldn't have done it.
that girl would have been still out her innocence potentially right now. So there are things that can be done, but
Yeah.
we have to be proactive. That's why it's so important for the people right now to support their local police, because they need the training, they need the equipment, they need to have the manpower, they need to have the resources to go out there and be proactive, because right now they can barely handle the reactive stuff, because they're just caseloads are just slammed, right? Even
Mhm.
prosecutors and stuff like that. And this is somewhat ish new. It's not really new, but investigating these things, it used to be called prostitution.
Yeah.
A lot of it, right? They were
Yeah.
all volunteering to be this. They're not volunteers. Let's just put it that way. There are volunteers, but there are a lot of victims, and we need to start identifying what are those identifiers. And police need to be trained, and they are. They are, and I get to be a part of this. I've been to them. And they're training law enforcement now not to interrogate the young girl, but to build a relationship with her and interview her, right? So it's just a different approach
Yeah.
than what we've always known. We used to pick up a girl for shoplifting condoms and charge her as a criminal. Now you better start asking some questions. Why is a 16-year-old stealing condoms and makeup?
hmm
Like, there's some red flags here.
Yeah.
And if you're not trained to identify those things, you treat her like a criminal. So that's why it's so important. That's mostly what we do, is train and equip law enforcement, right? We do it for free. They don't have to pay for anything.
Yep.
And so where can we start identifying this and training the guys to be proactive and go out and intervene, so that they don't have to physically abuse a child, and a child does not experience that?
Because if you're writing off a victim, you're also writing off a predator, right? So it's just as important to make sure that you're identifying, or you're discerning whether or not this person is a victim or a willing participant, right? And if they're a victim, then you can get to the root cause.
Yeah.
So that's key. I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit into just something I remember as a child. So when I was a kid, we used to watch that Dateline series with Chris Hansen, To Catch a Predator.
Oh yeah.
It was like our favorite show, because we were just bamboozled by how dumb these guys were. I mean, they would show up to a residential house, and you're like, can you be any more stupid? And whenever they'd arrest them, they would always like show a picture of the person and then their rap sheet. And I think 99.9, if not all of them, were repeat offenders. And so the question I have is, what are the typical repercussions for someone that tries to meet up with a minor, say from an ad, and what is needed to build a case strong enough to actually put them away for a long time?
Yeah, well, great question. And I'm going to just touch on the very last piece real quick.
Yeah.
What does it take to build a case to put them away for a long time? Well, that is exactly why what we do is so important.
Mm-hmm.
People want to talk about, well, how many rescues, how many arrests? That's great. But I could arrest 100 guys, and if 99 of them fall through in court because of some loophole, or they get off for 3 months probation, a slap on the wrist, or they plea out because the case isn't strong enough, what a waste of time and energy, right? Sucks. So where what we look at is conviction rate and years of sentencing, so that we can help law enforcement increase their conviction rate. How? And their prosecutors, by training them. Number one, if you go into and I'm not going to give away the details on how, but if we can go into the prosecutor's office with a case that's not just bulletproof, but 10 times bulletproof, not only is it a slam dunk for prosecutors that want to take these cases because it's an easy win, they're most likely going to get a strong sentencing. So like for us, we look at years of sentencing. Like if you have 100 cases and you got like 25 years of sentencing, or if you have 100 cases, you got 1,000 years of sentencing. That's a pretty significant difference,
Yeah.
right? I want to create 1,000 years of innocence for these kids, right? That's our
I love
first
that.
goal. Then we're going to go to 10,000 years of innocence, because the longer we can put these guys away, the more our time we have for our kids to be safe before they get back out. And the only way to do that is to build these strong cases. So we got to train police. Everybody's like, oh, entrapment and all that stuff. Yeah, that's like elementary. Entrapment's elementary. Of course, you can't entrap them because your case is going to get thrown out. There's a lot of other nails that you can put in the coffin to just destroy this case to where they can't. There's nothing they can do to get off.
I love what
Yeah.
you said about like measuring your progress and success by years of innocence. Like that's super, super powerful, because yeah, if that person wasn't locked up, who knows how many more years of innocence they would have taken away.
Yeah, well,
you know?
let's just go to the facts. On average, a predator will abuse 117 victims in
You're
their lifetime.
joking.
117. There's a lot of stats on our website, theinnocent.org. Go look at some of those. We're going to be putting them out on social media too. It'll blow your mind. So imagine that guy that we talked about in the RV, that was his first victim. Well, we potentially rescued or saved or protected 116 children.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll never have the stats. The best stats that we have are those that we'll never know because they never got their innocence taken away.
Exactly. And you may as well count every victim, like the years of innocence as an entire lifetime. You know what I mean? Because they're always going to be fighting that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whew. That's really heavy stuff. That kind of gets me into the next question that might be a topic more up for debate, but I'm curious in your thoughts because, you know, you've been exposed to these people and might have a better understanding of their psyche. I'm not calling you a psychologist, so answer within your comfort zone. But do you think that these people can be rehabilitated and reintegrated back into society and successfully function without reverting back to this perversion? Or do you think that once they've, you know, reached this perversion, there's no coming back from it?
Well, yeah, I'm definitely not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and I actually don't do any case studies based on the, you know, what are the statistics of, you know, continuing on this behavior. I do know that there are registered sex offenders that we've arrested, or my team's arrested previously, who are engaging with us again. So they are. There's also 100,000 missing registered sex offenders. You know, so rehabilitated is such a tough word. I think it's going to be a struggle. Even somebody who's an alcoholic for 20 years, who becomes sober for 20 years, still fights that.
Yep.
They can't keep alcohol in their house. They have a different lifestyle. They probably have different friends even, right? Because they know their weakness. I would say that, let's just play the devil's advocate here, because we are up for debate. If a 19-year-old has to register as a sex offender for life because he engaged in sex with a 17-year-old who's a minor, does he have a problem? Potentially
Debatable.
not,
Yeah.
right? But a 50-year-old who engages with sex with a 17-year-old, or quite frankly, a 19-year-old who's legal, I think is a problem there. I don't think that's normal, whatever the word normal is. I don't know. We're trying to normalize different things, but I think anything's possible. I just think it's very unlikely. Look, I could say some things that are going to make people just completely go off the hinges,
Yeah.
you know, because I believe in God's grace, that God can do miracles. I really do believe that. I just don't think that the percentage is pretty low on people who can be reintegrated back into society. Look, here's a radical thing, and I'm not saying this is what we do or what we should do. It's just something for people to think about. Our country spends lots of money training young men and women to go 10,000 miles away and to eliminate threats to our society, to our country. Children, there's actually a quote by Nelson Mandela, how children are the most precious commodity of our society, and it's our duty to protect them, right? So if the children in the United States of America are the most precious part of our society, and there are threats to our, not just our society, but to our children and our future, at what point is it okay to eliminate those threats? Now, I'm not saying that it just needs to be like death penalty, but if you're very clearly taking extreme measures to abuse children, and there's no doubt, I mean, life sentencing is one thing for sure. But I mean, I just don't understand why. And I can't even go down the route, but like, how do we allow it to come back into society?
Mm-hmm. There's so many
definitely
triggers.
Repeat offenders. If you did it a second time, there's no question. There's no question. You were given an opportunity to prove that you were rehabilitated and you failed. And I think this is just my personal opinion. You don't get a third chance, right? You should maybe have even gotten a second chance. We're gonna we're gonna give you 25 years to figure it out, and then you might get to prove to us that you've been rehabilitated. But we're also going to give you stipulations. You're going to register a sex offender. You can't live by a school. You're going to check in. Like there's going to be things that you have to follow so that we can kind of monitor your behavior. And if we find you online, or if we find you as a registered sex offender on these sites, blah blah blah, then you're like, it's done. Like, no questions. But then we go to a whole, and I've had these conversations. How full are our prisons and jails right now? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, oh man, it's so complex, and yet it's not. I mean, it's complex to the pieces and things that have to follow through and go through, but it's also, you don't mess with kids.
No,
that's simple.
And I think what I think about is if we're looking at this in terms of an addiction, addicts get more and more creative, right? And like you said, 100,000 registered sex offenders are missing, right? I mean, maybe that's a way they've gotten more creative to sort of cheat the system so that they continue doing what they want to do, right? So I really struggle with that because it's an addiction. And like you said, even if you're an alcoholic, you're always going to live with it. You can get better friends, but like, let's just even look at somebody that's addicted to food. You can't get away from food. You can't get away from kids. You can't get away from the internet. And you're going to have to be exposed to a child or use the internet in some capacity in some area of your life. Like, unless you want to live on an island and get rid of it all, you're always going to be surrounded by these triggers, right? Yeah. So that topic is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's not settling,
right,
for me to think that I don't care if it's soccer or church or school or wherever it may be, that I'm putting my hands of my children into the hands of somebody who has struggled or maybe continues to struggle with an addiction for child sex. I'm just going to say this right here. We talked a little bit about this before we went on the air here. People have this debate about, should I let my children have sleepovers? It's very similar. The answer is similar when I said like the soccer coach and stuff like that. I know people are like, well, you're going to take away my kids' fun by having a sleepover or, whatever it is, and I think we do need to get better background checks. And, I think too, if you're going to be around children, whether you're a coach or a teacher, you just waived your right to somewhat of your privacy to law enforcement to be doing investigations on you actively because you're around our children. So, but here's the deal. And people have this discussion with me and I can hear them, what they're saying, but I have a personal story that relates to this exact thing. Well, why you're going to, like me and my friends, we did sleepovers and it was so much fun and we did so much cool stuff. And I remember that. I don't want to take that away from my child. That's fine. That's you making that choice. But if you think about the risk versus the reward right now, and we can pull out some real stats, that 1 in 3 girls will be sexually abused before they turn 18 and 1 in 5 boys. So when you think about that stat, how does that happen? It's not always because they got trafficked, okay?
No.
Let me tell you, if you're willing to risk one night of fun for your child for a life of struggle with sexual relations, that's on you. Mm-hmm. You can make that decision because I'm going to tell you right now, it's not worth it. And do I want my kids to have fun? Absolutely. Those kids can stay at our house if their parents think it's okay, right? But also, sometimes I think people are like, well, we talk to the parents, we really like the parents, blah, blah. It isn't the parents that are molesting them. Yes, it is. It's in certain cases, but I'm just saying, like, you may love the parents, but it's kids. Like I said, that kid might have been molested by a kid in the gym or in the locker room. And he just thinks like, oh, well, this is just what happens. And now I'm going to do this to my sister's really cute friend who's 2 years younger than me, or brother, or whatever it may be, right? They're experimenting. They're in a weird state in life when you're changing hormonally, emotionally, your brain chemicals, your brain's not even developed, for goodness sakes. And so They don't know what's going on, and now you're willing to put your child in that, and you can't monitor your child and children 100% of the time. Some parents do, but I'm just saying, like, there's risk, and there's also parents who think that other parents parent the same way they parent, you know.
Yes.
And I know we're going to get into this, and this is what I love talking about parenting, because people want to say, like, well, how do I keep my kids safe, and what about phones, what about social media? It's a relationship.
Yep.
It's a relationship. You want to talk about technology, you want to talk about advancements of all this stuff, but when it comes down to human nature, it comes down to thousands of years of humankind. You got to look at relationships. You got to build an authentic relationship, and whether as a mom or a dad, and daughters and sons, and on both sides and all around, like, it's the relationship that's going to help you navigate through those conversations and through real trauma, and creating safe places and environments. And I mean, there's tools, there's training, there's things to go out there to teach yourself how to be a parent, because it is easier parenting is difficult, period. But there's ways to make these, I would say, the most difficult conversations parents have are around technology and social media right now. They're the most difficult conversations. Before it was like the birds and the bees. That's not difficult anymore because they're being taught it and shown it everywhere they look, right? And so really it's educating parents to have those educated conversations with the kids around those topics.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the relationship with your child, you're not really going to get that far.
Yeah. I was going to skip ahead a little bit after you said that, because, I know for myself, I've known I would be a great parent, but I've debated whether or not that's what I want to do in life, because it's harder than ever to raise a kid. Like, I can protect them to the best of my ability, but I cannot be everywhere they are at once. Like, I'll still have to go to work and put them in the hands of other people, whether it's at school or a babysitter, whatever. And so I feel like all it takes is a friend showing them something on their phone, and it all goes downhill, And so to that, I really love what you said. And I think earlier we were talking about just like as a father, like being that much more present in your daughter's life in particular, because one thing I talked to another guest about was how when women don't have like a healthy example of masculinity in their life and their dad, they confuse healthy versus unhealthy masculinity, right? So they might, and I think this is how it happens, is they didn't have a healthy version of masculinity that they were exposed to. And so when a predator, sort of starts to groom them, they think it's healthy, but really it's manipulative, right? And so I love what you had to say about just being like uber involved in your kids' lives. That's where it starts. So that way, when they are on their own, they can make better decisions, right? And they know they can talk to you if something happens.
There you go.
Right?
If you're their source of truth that they come to instead of their friends or the internet, man, you're going to have a much easier challenge. It's still going to be challenging. Don't think I'm saying it's going to be easy, but let me just give you real stories. So girls who are vulnerable, maybe their parents are divorced, so the dad's not around all the time, but he's still present when he is, right? And with phones, gosh, parents, here's a parenting tip for you. They're going to mimic you. So if you're on your phone all the time, they're going to be on their phone all the time. If they see that growing up, and they constantly, you're on your phone and you're on social media, they're just going to naturally know that's normal, right? Yep. That's what you do. So, I mean, I can go off on social media forever because I can tell you the dangers of it, but let's talk about being present in many different ways. Get off your phone and be present, because that's part of the problem, right? But also these children and these girls or boys, because it does happen to both, but they're in this moment in their life where they're seeking attention, maybe from boys at school or from even peers, other girls, or whatever it may be. I tend to use the girl scenario more often just because of like the reality is that, I mean, look, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys. So it does happen to boys. Don't get me wrong. And I can talk about that, but these girls are seeking attention, and they're seeking it and seeking it and seeking it. If the dad isn't, and it could be minor things, and you could do the fluff stuff like, oh, you look so beautiful. Oh, that looks so great, blah, blah, but just like giving them attention, because these predators who are fake 14-year-old kids named Nick, they're giving them the attention that their dad's not getting, and they've never heard this before from a 14-year-old boy. And they are falling in love quick.
Wow.
So how do you as a dad, and it doesn't matter if you're married or divorced, give your daughter the attention that they need? You're building, we want to say this, I just call it being a role model, right?
Yeah.
Like your daughter is going to grow up with what is the definition of a dad or a male or a husband or whatever, right? Well, what do you want your daughter to go find? And maybe you need to write that down. I want to find my daughter to find a guy who has integrity, who's honest, who's loving, who's selfless. Just make a list. And then I want you to put that list right in front of your face like a mirror.
Yeah.
And be that. Because if you be that as a dad, it's most likely your daughter is going to find that. Right?
That's so good.
Yeah, be that. And so relationship is so key. Attention, time, all those things are so important to be as a parent. And I'm talking about for your son. If you're a man, for your son as well, right? And women, for your sons and for your daughters as well. It's the whole world we live in revolves around relationships.
Yep.
You know, and so sometimes I love this line. Maya Angelou, they won't remember what you said or what you did. They'll remember how you feel, how you made them feel. Because I could be telling a child that I love them while I'm beating them senseless or sexually abusing them and telling them you love them, right? They don't feel love, right? So sometimes it's not even just about what you're saying, like I said, the fluff. Oh, you look so beautiful, which is needed. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But being there and having them actually feel that it's true and it's authentic, that you actually do love them, right?
Yeah.
You care.
100%. Yeah, like even the microaggressions. If you're sitting at the dinner table and your kid's trying to tell you about their day and you're like on your phone, you're like, like that alone can impact a kid so much. But it's so hard because like we're so distracted, right? So distracted. That's a good point. I'm going to pivot a little bit into kind of the work that you do, because I listen to a lot of podcasts about these things and they talk about the evolution of pornography. And, as perversions like this evolve, you have to adapt in your own work. And I know that you've traveled to dozens of countries. You've been exposed to these things for almost 2 decades. Are you still learning something new every day, or does very little surprise you anymore?
Oh, I mean, I just got shot.
I know the chills came again.
Chills.
The zingers. Yep.
I didn't think I could get shocked anymore. I mean, I have seen horrific things. I've seen kids who have been sacrificed for religious purposes. I've been involved with all kinds of horrific trails and just forced begging, and I mean, just horrific things what uncles will do to their nephews online. And like, there's so many stories that have traumatized me and all this stuff, and I've seen these things and my heart's been broken, personal events in my own life. And you think you get to the point where you're like, I'm not shocked anymore by anything. And I thought I was there, and I was there for a while. And then I turned my focus here to the United States, and I knew there was a problem in the United States. That's why I started this organization, to focus 100% inside the United States, right? I'll never forget my hometown, which I probably shouldn't have just said that, but that's okay because people are going to find out.
We can edit it out. It's all good.
It's a small town where we started running our first operations. You don't need to edit it out. It's fine because it's all part of the story. So these guys, was kind of what we do. And I can't give away too much of the technology and the training, but we do have advanced technology for law enforcement that we can provide on many different levels. And we were like, let's go investigate. I won't say how we do it, but let's go investigate what's going on in this small town, less than 50,000 people. And so they're like, how many guys do you think we're going to get? And I was like, 12. I was thinking 12 in this small town seems about right. Like it's not going to be one, but it's not going to be 10,000, So I probably didn't put much thought into it, to be honest with you, but that's kind of what I was thinking I would be happy with if we arrested 12 guys. And so we do our investigating, and within 24 hours, we have 55 different buyers for a 12-year-old.
And that's just one ad?
Yeah, it's one G-rated dark web search.
Wow.
Kind of, feeler out there. And I was like, wait. Are you guys sure 55 within 24 hours, not within a week? You're talking like within 24 hours. Like, wow. So I was a little bit shocked, right? So then we do it here locally, right? And well, actually, this was in Idaho, but we're close. And so I was like, okay, well, let's just see what happens here. And within 10 minutes, we had 4. And within like 4 days, we had 250. And I was like, what? Wow. And this is on like the G-rated version. So then now we go like to the PG-13 rated version. And sure enough, the guy hits us up immediately. Like, bang, start talking to him. Within 7 minutes, we had enough to go arrest the guy. And he did get arrested. And guess what? He had an 11 and 9-year-old living in the home, stepchildren.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, we've had plenty of those. So then you go to the R-rated version, and it's like insane. We actually have done this multiple times. We're probably going to release a video at some point with a timer. Like, ready, go, start the clock.
What?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bing, hello, 6 seconds. You're like, this is like based off your geolocation zip code, right? And you're like, wow, 6 seconds. Hey. And within 6 minutes, it's going to be on the video. I'll probably see like 40.
Wow.
And you're going, what? And they're like insane. These conversations, the first one is like, rate my junk. Here you go. Picture immediately.
Wow.
Copy paste. Are you looking to make $500 quick? Here's my real email address and phone number. And he just is copy and pasting this. And the picture is a 14-year-old that says 14/F, 14-year-old female. They know very clear before they even read what they're dealing with, right? And so you're talking about multiple people within 20 minutes would show up.
Wow.
Like insanity.
That is crazy.
And I'm not going to give too much away. Conversations with teachers. And then you're pretending to be, oh, you're a teacher? Yeah. What do you teach? 8th grade math. Oh my gosh, I'm in 8th grade. I hate math. And they continue these conversations after say I'm in 8th grade. What? Oh, how about this one? A teacher who says, oh, finally you get to the age portion of this conversation. Are you okay with that? Oh, no, I need to stick to an 18-year-old. Well, let's just go onto his real Facebook. And he's married and he has kids. And he's talking to an 18-year-old and he's a teacher at a high school. But it's legal because she's 18. He's like, oh, I thought you were 18, so we probably shouldn't talk. But if I was 18, there's girls in your class that are 18, dude. I don't care that you're 54.
Yep.
And you're meeting up with an 18-year-old. You're married, you have kids, and you're communicating on the dark web with what you think is an 18-year-old, and you're teaching those kids. We need to do something about that.
Yeah.
And we're going to arrest some school teachers, and we're going to make it public. And there needs to be some laws that need to take place soon where to protect our children, there needs to be monitoring, not background checks. Monitor their behavior, because I'm telling you, we can watch a lot of what you do online and it will blow your mind. So when you talk about shocked, go look at their Facebook. They have their family photo in the fall with the beautiful colors with their wife and their 2 children. They're disgusting. Doctors, you name it. I mean, it's insane. It's insane. I don't get shocked by like, oh, I can't believe it was that guy anymore. People will get shocked by like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I used to bank with that guy or blah, blah. That doesn't shock me anymore.
Right.
Like how fast and how much that is happening in small towns all over shocks me. Like it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. In a society where you could be in a large gathering, I can't stop looking like at every 3 girls and be like, wow, one of those, there's like 100 girls here under the age of 18. Wow. I can't believe 33 of them are going to be molested by the time they turn 18. You know, like I look at the guys, and so many people are addicted to porn that end up looking at like barely legal, they search, and how many men who are struggling with this addiction for young children, right? And they're like, well, I'll never physically hurt a child, but you're also creating a demand.
Yep.
Right. So now there's guys out there who can make money off of creating that content for you. to view. And so here's another thing about content. I know we're kind of a little bit off
keep
here,
going.
but I think what will be shocking to the listener right now is the 12-year-old girl, which is your daughter. And people think it's just the daughter that have become victims. No, it's parents too. Parents are posting pictures of their 10-year-olds in their bikinis on their Facebook, thinking that's cool. Okay, well, guess what? Tons of people are saving that into their photo reel and now taking that 10-year-old girl in her bikini, and they're probably selling it online. From the moms to social media, not just from the girls. That one's like a no-brainer. Hey, I'm so-and-so. Oh, you're cute. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling so cool from all these things you're saying to me. Oh, hey, did you go swimming at the lake or anything? What do you guys do for fun? Yeah, all the time. Well, do you have any pictures of you in your bathing suit? The girl's thinking, well, that's innocent because we go in public in our bathing suits. Yeah. I'm not showing him anything else. Yeah, here's some pictures. Oh, wow. 11-year-old bathing suit sold. Now your daughter, that girl, is on the dark web somewhere.
Yeah.
In her bikini. Right? And guys want to see 11-year-olds in a bikini. Is that sick?
That's so sick.
Insanity.
Yeah.
Right? So at that level, there's something wrong. There's definitely something wrong. So,
and we're so ignorant because everybody's doing it. You know, even like look at just women in general. They'll freely post pictures of themselves in their bra and underwear. And I'm always like, how embarrassing would that be if you're, for me, like dating a guy and their parents look you up and you're just like, you've got a booty pic. Come on. Like, we are way too ignorant to like what's going on, and we just post things so freely, and like nothing is ours anymore. Like, we barely can keep our identity without it being stolen, right? But people are just not, they don't think about these things because everybody else is doing them, and that's the problem, right? That was so informative.